Shalom. My name is Azriel Rosner, and I'm privileged to give this shiur Le'ilui Nishmat Sarah Lam Drach Alea Shalom Sarah Rivka Bat Harav Menachem V'Mindel. I knew Sarah Drach when I was teaching in Morashah around 10 years ago, and my wife and I only have the warmest and fondest memories of her and Rabbi Drach from that time. So it really, again, is a privilege for me to give this shiur Le'ilui Nishmata. Tehillim Perek Mem Hey is a beautiful Perek. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch describes that the Perek is discussing a king and a queen on their wedding day. The first Perek, Pasuk, is Lamatzeach al Shoshanim Livnei Korach Maskil Shir Yedidot. And of course, the king and the queen in the Perek are described in terms of their honor and their midot and their bravery and their finery. But as always with any Perek in Tanakh, the meaning of the Perek is not just the information, but what we are to learn from it. So what are we supposed to learn from this? Well, Perek Mem Hey is, again, a beautiful Perek with so many important things to learn from, so I couldn't possibly discuss every pasuk in the short time that we have today. So I thought I'd focus just on one pasuk, a very well-known pasuk, and give a little bit of a different take on it. In pasuk Yudalet it says, Kol kvoda bat melech pnima mimishbetzot zahav levusha. It's discussing the queen, and it says, the princess, and it says all the honor of the princess is inside pnima, which we'll discuss that word in a minute. From settings of gold is her clothing. What is this discussing? So first of all, the classic beginning of the pasuk, Kol kvoda bat melech pnima, is often discussed, often taken as a reference to tzniut, which is, of course, a beautiful thing, that all the honor of the daughter of the princess is inside. But, and here's where I'd like to give a little bit of a different take on this, I think there's something else to see here. It says, after all, Kol kvoda bat melech pnima. What does pnima really mean? What is the meaning, the connotation of that word? Well, the word pnim, that shoresh, that root, comes up in two major contexts in Tanakh. First of all, as everyone can guess, it comes to mean inside, like inside of a house. For example, in Vayikra, when it's discussing the Kodesh HaKodashim, it's described as El HaKodesh Pnima. But that's not the primary usage of this word panim. In fact, most of the time in Tanakh that it uses the shoresh, the root panim, it refers to face, one's panim. When one's facing a person, it's lifanecha. When one is running away from someone, it's mipanecha. When God speaks to Moshe Rabbeinu, panim el panim, face to face, panim usually means face. And if so, that doesn't really fit very well with the idea of hiddenness. After all, a face is the least hidden part of a person. Mishlei, Perek Chavdalid, describes Kimayim hapanim el hapanim, that really one's face really gives what's inside of a person, really tells you more than one's clothing or one's outer attire, what really is inside a person's heart. So therefore, what does panim really mean? What does pnima really mean? So I thought, what's the common denominator of a face and the inside of a house? Well, the answer is, well, that's really the definition of the house. Well, what do you know a house by? What's at the outside, the decorations? Okay, whatever. A house is really defined, the Beit HaMikdash is really defined, lahavdil, by what's inside of it, by the Aron Kodesh defines the Beit HaMikdash. And a person's face really defines who they are. It tells you who that person really is inside. It's not just the clothing that they put on that morning, which maybe reflects their inner essence and maybe doesn't. It really is the panim that tells you what that person really is inside. So therefore, when it says Kol kvoda bat melech pnima, it doesn't mean that, she should be hidden, chas v'shalom. It really means that the honor of a daughter of a king, the real honor of a daughter of a king, is what's inside of her. Meaning that despite the fact that the Perek describes the finery of a queen, and all the things, the beautiful ways she may dress, but the pasuk is telling us that the real kavod comes from her demeanor, comes from her midot, comes from pnima. That's what kavod really is. We even know that Perkei Avot, of course, describes Ezehu mechubad hamechabedet al briot, that who is honored? Someone who honors others. Not someone who treats themselves with honor, but how you treat others. So that's a beautiful thought and an important lesson for us in terms of what really makes someone regal and important, not how they present themselves, but how they behave and how they think inside. But a little bit of a problem with the end of the pasuk. The last three words of the pasuk are mimishbetzot zahav levusha. Her clothing, her levush, is from settings of gold. Settings of gold? That sounds pretty materialistic. That she's wearing golden finery? Okay, that's, I guess, nice. It's, very regal, but that doesn't seem to have anything to do with her midot, with her character, with who she is. So what does that have to do with the first half of the pasuk? However, I'd like to delve a little bit more, give a little bit of a thought on the phrase mishbetzot zahav, the phrase settings of gold. Why is that chosen? Well, the phrase settings of gold appears only in one other place in Tanakh, in Shmot Perek Chavchet, Parsha Tetzaveh, when it's discussing the clothing of the Kohen Gadol. One of the 8 garments of the Kohen Gadol, is the ephod, which is an apron that he wore. And the apron was worn around his waist, and in the back there were 2 straps that went upward. On the Kohen Gadol's shoulders, there were 2 settings of gold, 2 golden squares on his shoulders, in which there were 2 avnei shoham, 2 precious stones. And on those stones were engraved the names, the 12 names, 6 and 6, 1 on each shoulder, 6 on each shoulder, of the 12 shvatim of Bnei Yisrael. And those 2 settings of gold on the Kohen Gadol's shoulders are called mishbetzot zahav. Now, it's a very nice comparison between the Kohen Gadol and the Bat Melech. They're both honorable people, they're both leaders of Bnei Yisrael. But why mishbetzot zahav? Why is this chosen to represent the connection between the 2? After all, the Kohen Gadol is wearing 8 different garments. Some are more prominent. Mishbetzot zahav seems to be a detail in the ephod. If anything, even less. The mishbetzot zahav are, exactly as it says, settings of gold. The real important thing, you would think, are the avnei shoham, these 2 beautiful stones on the shoulders of the Kohen Gadol. The mishbetzot zahav are just sort of ways of those stones getting attached to the rest of the garment. You can't drill through the stone, so you set it into a setting of gold. The setting is the most important part? Why mishbetzot zahav? So let's think about what those mishbetzot zahav really represent. Well, the avnei shoham, it says in the pasuk, those 2 stones on the shoulders of the Kohen Gadol, it says explicitly what they're for in the pasuk. It says in Shmot Perek Chavchet that they are lezikaron livnei Yisrael, to remember Bnei Yisrael before God. Meaning, the Kohen Gadol, we know he goes lifnai v'lifnim, he goes into the Beit HaMikdash to daven, to do the avodah, and says the pasuk that the Kohen Gadol has to have the names of Bnei Yisrael inscribed on his shoulders to remember Bnei Yisrael. Meaning, I believe the idea is that the Kohen Gadol has to remember at all times that he's not just, an important person, but that he's a representative of Bnei Yisrael. He's a shliach of Bnei Yisrael. He's our messenger. And when he's going inside the Kodesh HaKadashim to daven or to do avodah in the Beit HaMikdash, then he's not just doing it for himself, he's doing it for all of Klal Yisrael. And so he carries on his shoulders like a burden that he's carrying, the names of all of Bnei Yisrael, the names of all 12 tribes, so that he remembers that. And what are the mishbetzot zahav if so? Those are how those names are attached to his garments. The mishbetzot zahav are the link between Bnei Yisrael and the Kohen Gadol. That's how those names of Bnei Yisrael get attached to the Kohen Gadol. That's how it gets attached to the garments, to the begadim that he wore. And if so, then mishbetzot zahav are not just, one of the garments, she looks very nice, she's wearing gold. They really represent a very important concept. When we say about the Bat Melech that mishbetzot zahav levusha, what we're really saying is that she always carries along with her the remembering Bnei Yisrael. That she always understands, the Bat Melech, that in everything she does, in every choice she makes, everything she does as a leader of Bnei Yisrael, that she's doing it with Bnei Yisrael, with her people in mind. Just as Esther Hamalka, everything she did for Bnei Yisrael. She put herself at risk for Bnei Yisrael because she knew that she wasn't just given that tafkid, that job for herself. the role she was given as a leader of Bnei Yisrael was really for the sake of serving the nation. And so if that's the case, then really the clothing that she's wearing is not just practical, it's symbolic. And it really tells us so much about this Bat Melech that the Perek in Tehillim is describing. It's telling us that yes, Kol Kvoda Bat Melech Pnima. Why? Because Mimishbetzot Zahav Levusha. Because she knows that the most important thing for her as a Bat Melech is that she has to remember that she is a representative of Bnei Yisrael. And what a lesson for all of us in all the roles of leadership in the community that we may take. That we have to remember that leadership is not there for the sake of the leader, to get personal honor, but really for the sake of the nation. And that it's really an honor to be an Osek B'tzarchei Tzibor and lead the nation for the nation's sake. And really, that should especially remind us of Sarah Dratch, who I think really did not hold herself, didn't covet honor for her own sake, but really, took on leadership when it was necessary only for the sake of Klal Yisrael and not for her own honor. So we should use this this pasuk and this Perek of Tehillim as a lesson for ourselves. And this shir should be Le'ilui Nishmat Rivka, Bat Harav Nachum V'Mendel.